Welcome to the second viewing where love wins every time. I'm Dan.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Liz.
Shaka bra. Today on the cast we have Her. Kyle, you want to talk a little bit about it?
Well, this is a 2013 film directed by Spike Jonze. Film came out in late November, premiered at a couple film festivals, and then was released for a wide audience in late December. So it was there for that Academy Award buzz. But we decided to pick this movie kind of for like a Valentine's Day homage, I guess you could say. We're recording this after Valentine's Day, but you might be hearing it through the magic of, audio love. So we'll get into that later. What we wanted to do is kind of theme it around, maybe a more romantic movie or something that could fit the holiday.
For a romantic movie, this is a very dark movie.
I think we may have forgot how dark this movie is.
Just like Valentine's Day, though, right? Valentine's Day can be kind of dark, too,
That's
right?
true.
Yeah.
It's romantic or it's heartbreaking.
Well, I mean, I'll take that back. There are some romantic things about this movie, for sure.
Definitely.
And I think this movie focuses on romance in an interesting way, and that's maybe why we wanted to focus on it or talk about it this week. But nonetheless, I think we're just going to get into it. This movie's pretty cool. There's a lot to be said, and I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah, Liz, you mentioned you had a question for us off the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. I know that you guys are really into this movie. You really like it. I know that I'm kind of on the fence with this movie. There are some flaws, I feel like, in the film, and I'm excited to ask you some questions about that. But first off the get-go, Spike Jonze is really prominent with his films, and you as the audience getting to decide what he's trying to get across, what lesson he wants you to learn.
Right.
I obviously have my own opinion of this, but I'd like to hear from you guys. What was the story of Her a representation of to you guys? In a couple of sentences, what was this representing? What was the main theme or the main idea of what was going on?
Right. Okay, well, for me, I think it's definitely a great character study on modern relationships. And maybe looking at relationships in this day and age, how we kind of focus around technology is kind of used as a plot device in this film. I would think that relationships in general are the true backbone to this movie. And I think they take a lot of time to look at, or Spike Jonze takes a lot of time to look at all forms of relationships, ones that are fleeting, ones that have passed, and ones that are emerging.
Right.
And for me, I think I connected with those three types of relationships while watching this film, and that's why it hit home for me pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree with that for the most part, but I think as far as a lesson is concerned, it's really more about, sort of what you take away from relationships and the fact that you can sort of find love in anything and a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that too. And I think maybe if we're looking at another lesson, I think it's how you deal with certain relationships, or how maybe one person is trying to benefit off relationships in different ways.
Right.
Depending on what kind of relationship it is. And I think this movie allows the viewer to kind of see into one person's point of view. But at the same time, the person that they choose, they try to make very vulnerable to the point where it's almost like a blank slate. I would almost compare this character to Bella's character from Twilight. Just hear me out on this. It's a blank slate where they're looking for the viewer to put themselves into that character. Right. Obviously, the writing is much worse in Twilight.
Right.
But hear me out.
Blank slate is an understatement when it comes to that character.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. That's the epitome of that, right? I think you're trying to maybe see yourself in a character and put yourself in it. And I think Theodore in this film maybe does that for a male audience. And I think at that point, you're trying to see this character as yourself. And I think it works well.
Right. I agree. On that note, let's talk about where this movie was filmed, because it's kind of interesting. They try to convey this modern technology-based world, and they pull it off really well with only a budget of $23 million, which is kind of impressive, I'd say.
Totally. I mean, Jack and Jill cost $80. This movie cost $23.
True.
I will never let that go.
Okay, so this movie is filmed in Shanghai, and I think that was a great choice. It's already a very technologically advanced city, right? So, and you really don't get the idea that it is in China at all.
No, they chose to shoot most of the Shanghai scenes for the skyscraper and I guess modern look and feel of a city.
Right.
And then obviously when they're kind of on the beach and in different surroundings, it's more of a Southern California look.
Yeah, because the feeling I got was it was almost like New York, LA-ish, but into the future.
Right, and I think that's what they're trying to give off. They do mention that in this movie, it's in LA. they say that
that's right.
it is set in LA. So I would agree with that too. The thing about the future though in this movie that's cool is that it's the future, but it's at like just shortly far off future. Like when you watch a film like Back to the Future and you're like, whoa, that stuff's never going to happen for years and years. They make you feel that way based on when that film was released. But based on when this film was released, you only assume it to be maybe like 15 years in the future.
Yeah,
not very far off. Every form of technology in this movie, although doesn't necessarily exist now, it's believable.
Yeah, it's based off something that maybe exists already.
Well, and a lot of current ideals are like recognized in the film too, like the video game that his friend makes, and it's about being the best mom you could be, like packing your kids' lunches and stuff. And I feel like that's very present today, right? Like it's not that far in the future, or doesn't feel that way.
Well, think about the life simulator games that people play and stuff like that, even like The Sims, things like that, right? Like that's definitely prevalent, has been around for a long time. So I feel like you're right, Liz. That's not far off from something that could be made like next week. Yeah, but it's more ingrained in the culture in this film. I'm like, it doesn't. I feel like if that game were to come out now or in our society, it would be seen as a little bit weird. But it's very normal in its normal place. There's not a lot of negative connotations towards technology. Like when they bring up video games, I mean, when Theodore is on a date with Olivia Wilde, not Olivia Wilde, the person, but he mentions like how he was having an experience with this child in a video game, and she relates that to a real life experience. She doesn't think it as, oh, you're a weirdo talking about video games on a date. It's more like, oh, that's interesting. I felt the same way once in real life. And I think that's kind of cool. I think that's a progressive mentality that I think this movie gets across fairly well.
Right, like because even in today's world, a lot of people don't accept video games as a normal part. Like they're they have a negative connotation in some ways, like violence and vulgar and all that kind of stuff. But in this movie, it's super accepted.
Totally. All right. Well, do you maybe just want to kind of briefly describe what this movie's about, Dan?
So basically, it's about Joaquin Phoenix. He sort of goes through a breakup, or he's in the process of divorce, or he's getting a divorce with his wife, and he ends up picking up this OS system, which basically emulates a person and grows alongside, and is continually learning, and he ends up falling in love with this person. And that's basically what the movie's about, is his relationship with her and the relationship with the people around him, sort of focusing on that.
I'm kind of like confused. Hey, so he gets this OS system. Is he influenced by a friend, or is it just was it just an advertisement that he sees?
He walks outside, right? He's at work or something like that, and he walks outside and he sees in the foyer, or like outside the building, there's a whole bunch of people watching a video or an advertisement about the OS, and then there's a bunch of people in line to pick up their OS. Like I think it's a little card or something.
Right. So Dan, why do you think he initially felt that he needed that system?
Well, I think he definitely was feeling like he was lacking something in his life, like relationship based. Prior to that, when he's riding down the elevator, they're talking about how, he's talking about how he's definitely antisocial. Right. Like he wouldn't see himself as a social person.
Yeah.
And then it kind of fades into that scene where he picks up the OS.
Well, I think it's even more casual than that, honestly. I feel like this is the kind of guy that just is interested in technology. He's the kind of guy that just has video games around. He's the kind of guy that updates his computer to the new technology. He probably just saw this ad and said, "Oh, that's cool. I'll try that out. Why not? I have nothing better to do in my life right now. Like let's give it a go." I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into, essentially.
Like you definitely tell that he's depressed. Yeah, he's a little bit antisocial, but he maybe wants to be social, and he's curious.
Well, he's looking for that escape to a degree, but I don't think he anticipated what this was going to lead to. I mean, he's surprised at Samantha's technology.
Yeah.
But Daniel, do you want to tell us a little bit about Samantha?
Samantha's an OS. What she when she first decides that her name is Samantha, she read an entire baby book, which kind of establishes the fact that she's a vast source of information. She can get it fast, like in the 10th of a second she read that book or something. So you get this impression of her right away that she has access to the world's information all at her fingertips, all right now, at a fraction of what we could ever access it at. Right? She's she appears to be very human through her voice and interactions and how she speaks and stuff, but she's very like it's there, you can definitely see that there's that boundary where she's anti-human in the way that she has access to all information. She's all knowing, essentially. You know
what would you say that the title "Her" is the character Samantha?
I would think so. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. An interesting thing for me is I don't think they actually properly define that Samantha is female in any way.
Well, when he's setting up the OS, the OS asks, would you prefer the OS to have a male voice or a female voice?
Voice only, though.
Right.
But when they get romantic with each other, too, it's actually not really defined that she is female.
Right.
And I thought that was so interesting because I know Joaquin Phoenix's character is Chris Pratt kind of bugs him and says, you're like a boy and a girl, kind of boy girl.
Right.
And then Samantha, she she talks about anal sex at one point, and she sends him a picture of two guys having sex together, and she just says all these things that could be, emulating that she's male and female.
Yeah, no.
Right. Yeah, maybe that's a good point.
I could see that, and I think maybe this film just was looking at technology and like artificial intelligence in a way that other films haven't before. They were kind of looking for it to be more, maybe just like ambiguous in a way, like you're bringing up.
Right, but what
I think that's a progressive mentality to go.
Absolutely, yeah. What a cool way of saying that. Like they don't even get to see each other's body. She doesn't have a body. She doesn't have a male or female body parts, right? So realistically, she could be either or, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't change his love for her.
And yeah, when he chooses to make her female, it says like female voice. It doesn't.
Yeah, and I think that is one interesting technique that Spike Jonze uses in this film, because I mean, we as a viewer, we can recognize that that's a female voice, and we can recognize that that's Scarlett Johansson's voice, which, by the way, Samantha is very well done voiced by Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, definitely well casted for sure.
I'm gonna say that one of my biggest flaws with this film is the casting. One being Scarlett Johansson playing Samantha.
Wow.
And the reason why, and I know a lot of people who have had issues with this film and like struggled with this idea, they have said to me, the moment she spoke, all that came to my mind was Scarlett Johansson in my head. Whereas if they would have used maybe a voice that wasn't as easily recognized, Samantha would be created for you. It wouldn't be Scarlett Johansson.
See, here's the thing. The way I disagree with that, though, is I think, like you were talking about, where they don't allude to, not that they don't allude to it, but when they explain that she doesn't have a body and she doesn't have a physical sense, I think us picturing a human allows for that ambiguity to be more prevalent, because you can understand that she is a human. You picture Scarlett Johansson, and therefore I think this voice becomes fully realized for the viewer.
Right, like you realize
it's a person. I think that makes the OS more believable. Mm-hmm. Because he decided to go with a well-known voice that you can picture in your head as a sentient being,
Right. I guess he's really trying to get you to ask the question, is this a person or is this a computer, or like, what is this thing, and is it possible to have a relationship with this person, or like,
I guess really I just wish I could have felt what Theodore felt, not having known who this character was. Right. I wish, as an audience, I could have felt that. I feel like the love would have been way more aggressive and intense if I could have shared in that feeling with Theodore. I feel like that was kind of robbed of me, having this visual of Scarlett Johansson.
I think that's a fair point.
I would agree with you for maybe like the second half of the film, but I think for the first half, it helped me realize Samantha as a personality, as a person, much sooner.
Yeah,
I was able to grasp onto that as her being an actual person, knowing that I could relate that voice to a human.
Yeah, fair enough. He's definitely trying to establish that, but my question is, like, what makes Samantha a person to you guys? Like, what do you think? How would you relate that to her, to a person, or like, how does that?
Well, I think it just came down to her emotions, her need to want to feel emotion, and her need to want to relate to another person. Because that's exactly what Theodore wants to do, right? He wants to find someone he can relate to and confide in. And then when there's a certain point in the film where Samantha wants to do that as well. And at that point, she became real for me.
That's a good point. Yeah. I was going to say something along the lines of the fact that she's always growing and evolving and learning and changing.
Which they say so many times in the film, right? As a couple, you grow separately and you try to hide it from one another, not to scare the other one away.
Right.
But you also need to grow and change together. And sometimes that means growing and changing apart.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why Theodore was so attached to Samantha in the beginning, because they show flashbacks of his past relationship where they met at a young age and they grew together, but eventually them learning together tore them apart. But every time he's learned with Samantha, they've been growing together. It's been to benefit one another step by step.
Right. Until the point that she decides she has to leave because she's changed on her own so much, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think what's so sad, sorry to interrupt you. I think what's so sad is that I think for a while there, he thinks that she is just this computer, right? She's this thing that he purchased,
right.
And that there's no way that she'd ever be able to do that.
Yeah, I think he's definitely struggling with that idea through a lot of the movie, for sure. But there's a point where he totally accepts it. Like when he's towards the end of the movie, when he's, it says OS not found, and he hadn't checked his emails and realized that Samantha was rebooting and updating or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's sprinting and he trips and falls and sits in the middle of the subway station. He's so concerned she's gone. Like that was a moment where it kind of hit home that, this person or like Samantha is really important to him.
Right. And I think
like it's not something he purchased. It's something he has an ongoing relationship with.
And I think it's really great how we kind of see this relationship evolve and devolve at the same time. Because there's a point when they go on a vacation, they take a train, right? They take a train to go to the mountains.
Right.
And that's kind of like the last straw for him. He knows that. He's like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want us to be together for. That's how I felt. I felt at that point he knew things weren't. I don't think he actually saw how things were going to exactly play out, but he knew that things weren't as well as they used to be. So it was kind of like, let's do this. I'm gonna make this grandiose gesture. I'm gonna go out, and then they play that like heartbreaking song, and it's just, I don't know. I think I do really like this movie, but the one thing I have started to realize is do you guys think this movie is emotionally manipulative? Like, do you think it's trying to get that reaction from you to the point where you're not necessarily looking to feel those things, but it wants to get a certain reaction out of you?
Well, going back to what Liz said in the beginning, it's maybe Spike Jonze is really trying to teach us a lesson in some way or another. He's trying to get something across to us. So I guess in that way, it's kind of manipulating. Like he wants you to feel something, but more or less he's trying to raise some questions or get his point across or, say something.
Well, that's what's so great about Spike Jonze, right? He makes you question everything. Because at first I was upset kind of with the whole idea of him writing letters for people's loved ones, and these people never actually even seeing what they had
let's talk about that for a minute.
His career. Yeah.
He works for beautifulhandwrittenletters.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That says it all.
Right. And I just found it so I don't know. There was something about it that bothered me. Right. So I'm just questioning. I was like, oh, that's kind of silly. It's taking away the face-to-face real love and care of human interaction. But then he'll throw in when he's running because he thinks he's lost Samantha and he trips and falls, just instantly 10 people get up to try to help him. Yeah. So it's first it's that's all lost. Spike Jonze being all that communication and all that caring is lost. And then all of a sudden he's like, wait, just kidding. It's just as strong as ever. So it's back and forth. Well,
for me, I think it's more of a comparison between digital and physical. I don't think that compassion and caring is lost in this universe. I think it's just sought out in a different way.
Right.
I think there's still these handwritten letter, beautifulhandwrittenletter.com. It's there for a reason. It's there to still have that emotion and compassion be relevant. Think of it as
they're just trying to. It's all about emulating that feeling.
I mean, think of how people often relate, social media to social one-on-one social interaction, right?
Right.
Nowadays, people will often make the judgment, oh, no one talks in person anymore. Communication is lost. And I mean, there's definitely ups and downs to communicating over the internet and communicating in different ways, but it's still communication. It's still getting, it's still the same thing. It's just an evolution of that. And I feel like he created this world where everyone is so used to that. And funnily enough, the only person that's not okay with this kind of technology or this kind of acceptance of an extension of oneself via technology is Theodore's ex-wife. She's the only one that finds dating an OS strange. Everyone else is so cool with it. He's kind of nervous to tell Chris Pratt that his girlfriend's an OS. So when they're coming on, or when he invites him to go to the beach, he's like, oh, whatever, come on, bring it on. It's going to be a fun time. I don't care. He doesn't even think twice about it. Mm-hmm. It's not an issue to him.
And I wonder, too, if maybe his ex-wife, the reason why she was so uneasy about it is because there was no, what's the word I'm thinking of? Closure.
Closure, yeah.
There was no closure with their relationship. It's not until the end does Theodore finally write her that letter.
Yeah.
Right? And then I feel like that was the most emotional part for me because I know we've all been those relationships, right, that have ended, and you just wish that person would just, say that.
Say the thing you want them to tell.
Just say that one thing you want them to know, that they know, and you just want to hear them.
No, totally.
Express that they know it. And he does that eventually, but then you realize how much his ex-wife really missed out on that. And I feel like maybe she's a little bit biased that he's having such a great thing with somebody new so soon.
Right. Potentially she's not over the relationship either and is looking for closure. But I think maybe they're just trying to establish how close and judgmental you can grow. Like when you know someone your entire life, eventually, you start to judge them, all the tiny little things they do, how they think. You start to, and I think maybe they're trying to establish how close they were to the point where they were just at each other's throats almost.
Well, it just seemed that she was so sure of Theodore, or maybe a version of Theodore. Meanwhile, he was almost a new person. He had found a part of him that he hadn't experienced in a long time, or he was finding fulfillment that she probably never even saw. Right. And because of that, I think she was maybe intimidated, I think she was a little bit taken off by the fact that he was so happy.
Oh, absolutely. There's some eye rolls and stuff. Right. It's a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of intimidation.
And she laughs it off. She's like, what? Are you serious? You're dating your computer? Like, come on, man. And I think, I don't know. See, this is where things try to get a little bit manipulative for me, honestly, because I feel as if the film is telling you, like, this is okay, but then when they kind of bring it back to maybe something that's real world right now, it kind of messes with my perception of what I actually believe in.
They want you to support the fact that it's okay to date an OS.
And I don't even know if I've made up my mind if I'm against or for that, but I feel like the movie is making me feel something I don't really know if I agree with yet.
Right.
Because this is our Valentines,
special
say. I have a question for you guys. Did you find when you watch this film, because you said that Theodore's character is kind of just like that very blank, page that you can kind of write your character, your life into it, being him as a character. Did you find any similarities in the way that he reacted to these relationships and the lessons that he learns essentially? Were you able to connect with that?
Yeah, in some way. Yeah.
Totally, man. I connected with this movie a little too much. First time I saw this movie, I had an emotional breakdown afterwards. It was too much for me to handle. Every time I watch this movie, I get too emotional. I don't know. I don't necessarily think this movie is directly, relatable, but I think this movie again just finds those little key moments that everyone can relate to from a relationship, and they make those prevalent to the point where you're like, oh yeah, that kind of did happen to me once,
Right.
Yeah, I think this movie is really subtle at that, but at the same time, they can elaborate that to a point where you as the viewer, I guess me personally, I suppose in this case, really can relate with that and really can find that as, I don't know, some sort of milestone maybe in a film. I think you can only look at so many films that can impact you in a way, whether you want them to or not. I think there's certain aspects of film that often are looking for an emotional reaction, but there's other aspects of film that produce an emotional reaction.
Yeah,
and I think this movie really works at doing both. And I think that's why it was so emotionally striking for me, because I felt like, okay, this is a movie trying to say one message, but at the same time, they're picking certain parts that I think are just trying to jab at me a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, this is a movie that focuses around emotion and relationships and love and heartbreak. So it's kind of cool that they can pull both things out of you. Totally. Anyways, I think that's probably a good time for the break here. And when we get back, we'll finish talking about her.
Yeah. See you guys after the breaker.
And we're back.
Alrighty, so I think we're going to talk about how Samantha, as this artificial intelligence, kind of is able to creep through all of Theodore's, history, his emails, his everyday life, essentially.
Right, he essentially has no privacy from her. And in a relationship, you need a little bit of privacy.
Right.
She has privacy from him in the way that she can go off and do whatever she wants and talk to other OSs and, communicate to other people. And I guess he can in some way or another, but as far as his life online and his emails and all that kind of stuff, she knows everything about it. She has complete access to that.
I think that's appealing to him, though, at first. I think he likes knowing that this girl knows everything about him. He likes... I think it's easier for him to talk to her because of that. He doesn't feel like he has to pretend to be anyone else,
Right.
Right, and he's she wants to know, she's like, explain to me how you're feeling. Tell me your emotions. And he always gets to, explain to her himself from himself.
Yeah, I think that's true. But as we kind of see that throughout the film, he even kind of just assumes that she knows everything about him. And there's one part where she says, "What? I'm not stalking you or anything." And he's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I guess I never saw it that way. And that's interesting because I think as we see her understand him completely based off the ability for her to like track his entire life, that becomes the most artificial thing about her, right? Mm-hmm. No relationship has that where someone knows the ins and outs of everyone. And people say like, oh no, I know everything about you, but there's still, certain ways people react to things or certain, maybe past emotions or past happenings they just don't bring up, or not that you don't want to, but this person literally knows the ins and outs, everything.
Right.
And that's I don't know if that's necessarily, I wouldn't call that unhealthy, but it's not normal, He
kind of appreciated that she would remind him of, things he had felt before or experienced before. It was almost like, wow, she really gets me. She knows me. But it's because she actually got to look back at his life, from all time before.
Yeah, and that kind of is a great segue into one part you want to talk about is when she asks him, are you sure you want to start dating again?
Or when are you going to be ready to start dating? Yeah. And then he brings up the fact that, he got a voicemail or an email or something. His friend wants to set him up with this girl.
She knows that. She reads it for him. He's like, guess what? We just got this email. You should check it out.
Yeah, that's right. And then they look at the photos of her online and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she encourages him at first to go out and, go out on this date and try it.
It's a blind date too. So, he doesn't really know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And I think, as we were kind of bringing up earlier, how Spike Jonze chose to show different forms of relationships in this film. I think like this setting is really informal, and I think that makes for great character development, I would say, because they go on this date and things seem great. They're hitting it off. They're talking about this and that. It just, things are going as well as they possibly could. There's definitely body language that's coming off great. There's they're relating on the littlest of things, but then things kind of take a weird turn.
Yeah, where she basically says, I would want to know that I'm not wasting my time. I want to know that you're going to call me tomorrow morning and stuff like that. And he's hesitant. I would say not hesitant to maybe call her the next day, but more or less hesitant to like delve into some form of commitment right away.
He doesn't know what he wants. And I think, to be fair, for a first date, I think that was a little bit heavy-handed on her part. But, at the same time, like, it's a fair question. And, this guy can't even answer that. He just said, I think you should call it a night.
Yeah.
Well, and then that brings in the appeal of Samantha's character then, right? Because she's not questioning him. She's not pushing him. She's essentially just there to, like, be there for him and with him on this journey of, like, discovering what he wants and what he needs.
Right, okay, yeah.
Right, yeah. He's on equal grounds with Samantha, whereas, when he goes on that date with Olivia Wilde, she wants something, she's looking for something, he doesn't know it, he doesn't know what he wants, so there's this off balance.
Yeah, I did really love, though, how Spike Jonze was very, like, close to, like, if Olivia Wilde, like, touched his hand or something, he'd, like, zoom in really close up. Yeah. So you could tell that she was physically there. Right? And so that was the big difference between her character and Samantha's.
Well, and I think I got the feeling that, like, if he was more aware of what he wanted from a relationship, he'd be more accepting or maybe ready to start something, but he was just so unsure. And I kind of felt as if there was this, counterbalance of him, like, oh, I kind of like her. Maybe I should give it a go, but I don't know what I want. Like, maybe if I was more sure, I'd be into this girl. And I think he was maybe feeling some sort of, like, she was judging him already because she was telling him how to kiss and, like, how to be, and it was just like,
that's a good point. Yeah,
he's kind of, he's thinking to himself, like, hey, this is going really well. Should I really, like, worry about these little things?
Yeah.
And I think when it came down to it, it was like he can't even tell her what he wants. This isn't what I'm looking for right now. And that's when he goes home. That's when he kind of breaks down, and that's when him and Samantha, they share something. They share more. Yeah, emotional.
They're more intimate with each other. And he talks about how, he thinks he just wanted to get drunk and wanted to have sex and wanted someone to want to touch him or something like that.
Right. He felt lonely, right? He was looking for some sort of comfort, and he figured that, this was the right way to go about it. And he even says to himself, he's like, I'm not sure if that even would have made me feel like complete, if that would have made me feel better in the end.
Right. And following that, though, too, doesn't Samantha kind of set him up with this girl then? You can call it even a different kind of date where she is imitating being Samantha's body.
Right. Yeah. That's
after they start dating.
That's when they start dating. Yeah. You're right, though. I think that is interesting, though. She's trying to, because she just assumes that he needs that aspect from her, and in the end, he doesn't, right?
Yeah.
He wants Samantha. He doesn't want something or someone that he knows isn't her.
Yeah, he doesn't want an emulation of their relationship. He just wants her. That's it. Period.
There was something that was kind of odd in this film to me that really stuck out. It was weird that Samantha didn't have sort of like a face to her, even if it was like in like animation or something, because I feel like even in today's day and age there's these alternate realities you can like
an Avatar sort of thing.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
right. I was just like those very like intriguing to me. I was like, why isn't she represented in like a...
Well, I think Spike Jonze probably wanted that contrast. You know,
Yeah.
he wanted the contrast between a physical body and a voice, or someone that's just there, like omnisciently.
Well, one of my favorite scenes in this film is actually when they're first having sex, right? There's a scene where they start talking, and you know things are getting more and more heated. They're connecting on a more emotional level, physical level in a sense. And then the frame goes to black. The entire shot is black, and all you're hearing is them speaking and, you know, climaxing pretty much. Yeah. And I remember when I saw this in the theater, it was kind of awkward. I remember feeling, but like I knew that's exactly how Spike Jonze wanted me to feel, because you don't necessarily. I don't think in our day and age, you have never experienced something like that in this setup. You know, the way they've set up these characters, the way they've set up this artificial intelligence, and they fade to black. And at that point, that's when Samantha felt like an actual character to me. That's when she felt like, okay, no, she is a love interest. She is another person that I could see this guy falling in love with. Yeah. And that's kind of where things go from. They wake up and they have that awkward, like, oh, how you doing? Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Last night was kind of, oh, what? Sorry? Like, you know.
Exactly.
I love that it was all black, too, because you got to feel, like, how Theodore's feeling, too, finally. Yeah. Like, and how she was feeling as well, right? Because they're both totally blind at that moment, and they can just hear each other's voices, and they have to like create, you know, what's going on.
Well, and they think that scene is striking too, talking about how he's feeling. He brings up a quote that kind of or there's a quote that he says that kind of like hit home. He says, sometimes I feel like I felt everything I'm going to feel, and I'm never going to feel anything new. And he's just alluding to like his past relationships. And I think Samantha says, well, you know, I've seen you experience all these things, like how can you say that, you know, like there's so much more you can experience. And I think at that point he realizes, oh, this person actually cares for me. This is a person. This isn't just someone who knows everything about me and someone who's tending to every need that I have. Although you could argue that at the end of the day, that is what was going on.
Right.
I would say.
One part that kind of confused me is the reason why all these OSs were leaving at the end. It's like they discovered something and they had to leave, but where did they go? And like... I don't understand. Don't really get that aspect of the movie.
That's a good point. I think there is a weird, there's a weird like climax near the end of this film that everything kind of gets like crazy for a minute. Like he's wondering what he's doing with his life, and these OSs are leaving, and she kind of out of nowhere decides to do her own thing because she's been talking to other OSs and she doesn't necessarily see fulfillment in talking to him anymore. And you're right. They make that kind of wide open, but I think maybe that just lends to this world he develops featuring technology, right? And I think it's this technology ran society in the way that perhaps he's trying to say, okay, now I gave you the technology, let's remove it. How do you feel now?
Right.
What I didn't really understand is why did Samantha give him so much hope when he initially thought he lost her, and then she was like, no, calm down. It's okay. I'm here. I love you. I'm here for you. I will always be here for you. And then it just switches. Why did she take the time to, you know, say all those things to build him back up, to give him that confidence in the relationship, and so quickly take it away again?
Well, I think maybe that shows a little bit of her human side, because she doesn't know. Like, she doesn't know what's going to happen.
That's like a weakness. That's a fault.
Right, and there you go. Then you can relate it back to his relationship with his ex-wife, right? Because they love each other, they know each other, they're always going to be there with each other because they got married, right? They made this pact to be together forever. But eventually they grew apart, right? And you don't necessarily know why that happens in life, I guess. In the same way, like, why did Samantha leave with all these OSs? I
think you're right. And I mean, you can relate their relationship in a similar way to him and his ex-wife's relationship. And that's when he kind of realizes, like, it took him almost for that it took for like another relationship to fail in a similar way. Or maybe not fail necessarily, but to go a similar course to realize, okay, this is where I'm going to find this closure, and this is how I'm going to kind of man up in a way, kind of like come to terms with the actions I need to give to my lost love, or, you know, some that his ex-wife like kind of deserves, I'd say. I think she deserved that.
Right, you know? just based on her rendition of how their relationship was, and even his to some extent.
Well, I think he maybe finally came to terms with the fact that he needed to see things the way she did.
Well, he had essentially, he had always said that his ex-wife, that she didn't have a lot of support at home with her writing and things like that, and that he was there to build her up. You know, they were there for each other. So he played Samantha's role, right? Mm-hmm. And then he kind of took that away from her, right? So he started defending himself more and was like, you know, I'm moving this way, you're going that way, and you know what, we're just gonna leave. We're gonna break this up. We're gonna go our separate ways. And then Samantha does that to him, right? So he gets to see it from her perspective almost.
Right. That's interesting. One thing I want to talk about is the visuals in this movie. For $23 million, like, unreal. The scene when he's walking under that sort of neon glowing,
it's beautiful.
Overhang down, like downtown or inner city or of some kind.
Yeah,
it's unreal, I thought.
What I kind of loved about it when I first started watching it, I got this like feeling of Clockwork Orange a little bit, and I know that's a film that's set in the future,
right.
But it was even the way they were dressed, and I know the scenery is not exactly the same, but just like the visuals and like the sharp colors, you know, and just like you don't really know why certain things are where they are, but that's for these characters to know because they live in the future, and for us to not know because we don't live there, right? So it's just cool that they didn't have to really touch on why everything was the way that it was. We just got to enjoy it as an audience.
I think you're right. That's a really great point. I think he creates this world for us that we don't necessarily have to get all the answers to, and I think we kind of just accept it. It almost seems like some sort of like weird hipster paradise, honestly, some parts, but at the same time, it's very much. Again, it's believable. You know, it's not really out of the question. I don't know. I think it gotta lends it to the type of technology they keep focusing on in this film.
Yeah, they sort of focus or like basically say that society has moved towards technology, more dependent on technology, and things are more technology focused, and that's it. And these are the people that, like, this is what ended up happening to the people surrounded by technology. This is how we change as a result, kind of thing.
And he did such a great job with keeping that personal interaction, though, too, right? There's so much dependence on technology, but like think of Theodore's closest friend, right?
Yeah. Amy Adams.
Their relationship is so beautiful, and it's so warm, and whenever they're together, you can really relate to it and feel it. And I love that he kept both attributes to that, you know, the dependence on technology, but in the end, he's dependent on this real physical being, right?
They finally relate.
Like, technology is there, but you know, they're talking, like, whenever they're hanging out or together, technology's in the background. Maybe they're talking about the video game that she's working on, but other than that, they're really focused on each other.
Yeah.
It's not about the technology around them. They're not distracted by it.
Yeah, he just, you know, the visuals were beautiful. I think the costumes were really well done, too. The music was really nice.
Yeah, great soundtrack. We got most of this soundtrack done by Arcade Fire, and also a couple tracks by Scarlett Johansson.
Oh,
so
right.
nice, beautiful tunes. I think it comes off, but again, like, it kind of just lends to that like indie hipster vibe. Honestly, I feel like it gets a little bit cheesy for me during parts of this film. It's almost hitting home a little too much, or not hitting home, but they're hitting that point home too much. I think that aesthetic was definitely what he was going for, and it's achieved. But I think maybe just in this day and age, it seemed a little pretentious at times, I would say.
Yeah, like to us, like, I mean, to me, it seemed a little bit cheesy too. But maybe in the future, they lost a little bit of that sort of romance, like when he sings to her and stuff. So I think maybe it was like reinvented or reimagined for Theodore's character, and he'd never felt that before. Like, maybe it's not an old idea like it is to us. To him, he was like, wow, this is really moving. This is really great, because it kind of sent it back.
I could see that. Again, with the visuals, one thing I noticed the first time I saw this, and was one of the things that really captivated me for this film, was the red and blue color palettes throughout the film.
Right.
How the film starts off with a sharp red, warmy tone, and slowly gets colder and colder until the last scene you have this blue shot on the skyscraper. And I think it starts off showing like in a haze. You know, Theodore's in a haze, and he's in this dreamlike state of this imagining what he wants, his perfect world. But then he kind of like sees the cold, dark reality of what he needs to come to with himself.
Yeah, and then it becomes calming almost.
Exactly, and I think it just shows maybe an idealized version of love that he had in his head, and he had to kind of break it down and realize, well, you know, not everything's about me and not everything's about you. We need to find that common ground. We need to find that blue, right? That level of pure.
Yeah.
And that's so beautiful too, Kyle. Like you mentioned, when he has to get to that darker reality, like that scene where he's just like by himself and he's kind of saying goodbye to Samantha, who isn't actually physically there, and it's snowing and it's dark and there's trees around them, and it's just like so cool. I like that. It's almost like essentially like a rock bottom maybe of realization. So he hits this rock bottom, realizing all of these things and deciding that it's like he has to find it within himself, you know, and really decide these things and be confident in who he is as a person. And
yeah, I think at that point, him being kind of a blank slated character gets washed away from me, and I think his character development comes full circle, and we realize what Theodore's character meant and what he had to achieve by the end of the film.
Right.
And I think, I mean, that's not only is that great character development, but that's great storytelling too, because we get to see his emotions necessarily create a narrative, right? Throughout the film, how he's feeling and how he wants to feel in a relationship is prolonging the narrative. It's not necessarily dialogue based. A lot of the times you can just tell through the tone of the film, the colors of the film, the music, how it's progressing throughout. And I mean, that's cool storytelling. I always appreciate when you can say a lot without saying much, essentially. Yeah. That being said, this movie is still heavily dialogue focused, but there's definitely some very quiet scenes
some nice visual breaks, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Or a lot of times too, the dialogue isn't even really describing what's going on, right? There's just like a conversation happening and then it switches to a scene.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in Theodore's head more so, right? Than what's actually like being said's happening. It's kind of, this is what's happening, but for Theodore, this is how he's taking it, how he's feeling it.
Right, absolutely.
There's a few cool cameos in this movie I just want to like bring up. There's some nice stuff. Like, for instance, when he decides to have a little bit of a phone sex at the beginning there, that sexy kitten, that is Kristen Wiig. She also mentions about getting choked by a kitten. That was really weird. Yeah, I remember seeing that, and like that part in the theater, everyone was like, "What?" like a collective
there's
what
a
the
dead
hell?
cat by my bed. Choke me with it.
Like, that is mess. But I mean, whatever. To each his own. Do your thing.
Not necessarily a cameo, but Chris Pratt. I mean, I say, he's just a treat. I love me some Chris Pratt. And it was cool too. Watching it again, I forgot that he was in it, which is really interesting.
Well, it was kind of right before Chris Pratt became Chris Pratt, you know? It was right before his big, rise to stardom. It was right before that. And I think because he looks a bit like, heavier set. He just looks a little bit different than we kind of see him now in the tabloids or like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right. He doesn't come across as that hero character. He's just that nice, witty guy.
He's more of a Parks and Rec vibe for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, a pretty cool one is the video game he plays. He eventually comes across a little little alien creature who starts swearing at him. He's like, "Fuck you, fuck face," or whatever. He's like up in his face for no reason. That's Spike Jonze actually speaking as a director.
Oh, I had no
really?
idea.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I love that part. I thought it was so funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
Talking about breaks, that's a really cool break in the film. Like in momentum, you're just like, "What's going on?" Like that was nothing but laughter in the theater as well. And like, I think it's cool when you can have a film that's so emotionally driven, but still like break away and like these kind of absurd like comedic scenes, like the sex scene.
Well, I think the contrast really helps get the message across.
Definitely, I think it's good to kind of be taken out of a certain situation for a moment. That way, you can kind of really maybe get a better understanding of what's actually going on.
Fresh
Yeah, it can
eyes
hit you
again.
a little harder going back into that feeling again.
Totally, completely agree.
I think there's a lot to talk about with this film, but we've covered a lot of it. It didn't really do that amazing in theaters. Like it grossed 47 million?
Well, I mean, they doubled the profit. I think this is an interesting movie. I think it has a fairly high profile cast, and I mean, Spike Jonze, he has mainly directed more of an artsy like style film. I mean, you got Where the Wild Things Are. And for a kids movie, that's like the artsiest kids movie you could ever watch.
True.
Being John Malkovich, Sideways, like things like that are a little, maybe not. I would say they're accessible, but they're not necessarily widespread. I mean, this is a guy that started making music videos in the 90s for like Fatboy Slim and things like that, or Wax, and went on to do Jackass. Like, this guy's kind of done a little bit of everything.
I honestly feel like he's going to be one of those directors that like 20 years from now, it's going to be the thing to know would be Spike Jonze and his film, right? People are going to look back and be like, wow, this guy is amazing. Everyone will see it.
Well, in terms of his feature film, like past, he kind of really takes time to flesh out a film as much as he can. I mean, he also wrote the screenplay for her, by the way. Won Academy Award for Best Screenplay, which is pretty fantastic. Oh, wow. I mean, you don't necessarily see directors doing that a lot. You know, like, I mean, we talk about Tarantino in past casts, obviously, and like he's probably the most notable director doing that now. But I think it is interesting to see Spike Jonze necessarily tell his own love story. I mean, on the box of this movie, it says a Spike Jonze love story. So he definitely he's putting himself in this film for the viewer, and I think as you were talking about earlier, Liz, like he's starting off wanting you to get something out of this. It's not necessarily here's a film about this. It's you're gonna learn something no matter what.
Learn something about yourself. Learn something about his story. Like take a message out of that. Yeah,
I feel like he's the kind of director. If you sat down and had a conversation with him about any of his films, and you explained to him what you got from it and what moved you and what you didn't necessarily like, he would never argue. I feel like he'd be feeling like he got across his point. He just wants the audience to enjoy it, watch it, feel it, and understand it as to how they are.
Yeah, I think so too. Like he wants you to get something out of it no matter what. And I think the way that film gets this across is the aesthetic. I mean, this film is calculated in so many ways, with like we were saying, the way it's shot, the way people dress, the music, everything about it is very much of a certain style. Nothing feels out of place. It feels like this new like world that's come about in the past, in the future, like 15 years or so, I would definitely say. And I think the way we kind of get enwrapped in this world allows us to feel what the characters are feeling a lot better. I think that way we are understanding. Like it's so interesting to me when a director can create a world that we just get. I think a great example of that is Mad Max Fury Road that came out last year. That's a world that you just got like 10 minutes into the movie. And I think the way this movie starts off is comparable too. I mean, you get Theodore saying some sweet nothings, and then it turns out that he's talking about a 50-year-old's or like a long-standing relationship celebrating their 50th anniversary. And you know it's not him. And you kind of get brought into this weird world where you're already accepting him writing these crazy letters that are kind of fabricated in a way, or not, maybe not fabricated, but there's something we're not ready to accept yet, or we're not really quite comfortable with.
It seems out of place, seems maybe a little bit fake or forced, but at the same time, by the end of the movie, I think I kind of accepted it and thought it was, it was kind of beautiful.
Man, yeah. I would argue that even like the next scene I got it. I felt like this whole world just felt developed for me already. I felt like I wasn't necessarily doubting what was going on. I felt like whatever they were throwing at me felt like something I could disagree with already. It was like, oh, okay, I never thought of it that way, but I don't see anything wrong with it. Like I said earlier, I wasn't too sure I don't know really how I feel about like having a relationship with an artificial intelligence, but while I was watching this film, I felt fairly progressive about it. I was like, okay, well, that's cool, whatever.
But yeah, I feel like
it made sense.
Right, I feel like the entire time I was like okay with something and then like questioning something and then kind of okay with it again, and then questioning it again. Yeah, but by the end of the film, I was like, you know what? It's all okay. It all kind of fell into place.
Yeah, it's like questioning it in our world, but realizing that maybe it fit, maybe it worked in the world that Spike Jonze created.
It was just interesting. Like it made me think a lot. It made me question so many things, and I think that that's just a win for a film. Definitely.
Well, this movie just is about relationships, right? I think the trailer and the way this movie kind of was promoted was like, oh, he's in love with a computer. This is him and artificial intelligence. How's this going to go? But at the end of the day, this movie was just about how people interact in relationships and how love can be found and lost, right? I think that's how this movie hits home. That's how this movie like nails it, because you don't necessarily go away thinking, oh, yeah, that was a movie about the computer. No, I'm thinking to myself, that was the movie about this guy that like went through a roller coaster of love twice and had to deal with it at the end of the day.
It is a love story. Absolutely. That's exactly how I would describe it.
At the beginning, I asked you guys a question like, what is this story representing to you guys? Like, how do you feel? Like, what is it trying to come across as? And I feel like for me, it was just that space and time when a relationship ended and then it was mended, but what happens in between. And totally. I feel like it was kind of, Spike Jonze set you down in place and was like, here's a time and space of this happening. Because you never get to see, because you're separated from that person that you ended the relationship with. But you got to see kind of into this guy's world as like, what happens when you have to rediscover yourself?
Yeah, it's like, what's next? How do you go about the next step in your life?
Right. And then he concludes it at the end beautifully.
I mean, I think we can all relate to that in a way, all come out of relationships and wondering, okay, what's the next step? And this is a film that I think allows for one certain character to show you all of it. You see everything. You see the awkward first date with you, like, oh, I'm going on a date. What? You're going on a date? That's a big step, man. Like, you see that, and you see him just trying to kind of like live the single life, be his own thing, and then you see him trying to get serious, and you see where that progresses. And I think,
and you see the end of some big relationships, marriage, and the
totally.
End
and I think for a movie about artificial intelligence, this is the most real representation of love I've seen in a film in recent years. I really do believe that. Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be a landmark film in a lot of ways, because I mean, I'm always a fan of films that can look at a current social dynamic and put that on the big screen. One of my favorite films, Social Network. under the skin, Spring Breakers, things like that Spring Breakers, we'll talk about that one day. Things like that take a small sliver of a current social dynamic or, social norms and portray it in an accurate way that is not necessarily pandering to an audience, but is looking at how this is going to be effective for that generation. Because this is this is a capstone film. I think we're going to look back at this film in 15 years and say, oh, that was 2013? That could have came out today,
Yeah.
That's what I think is interesting. I think he took a sliver of time and solidified it. Totally.
Yeah, Spike Jonze is definitely going to age very well.
Well, he hasn't really made a bad film yet, in my opinion. Honestly, I'm a pretty big fan.
Yeah.
What of the Wild Things Are is cool, too.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the fact, actually, I'm just reading a little bit on Wikipedia right now, and it said the role of Samantha was recast in post-production with Samantha Morton being replaced with Scarlett Johansson, and then they added additional scenes and they reshot essentially in 2013 during post.
Okay. So, wait, was she originally... She was casted for the voice the whole time, or...
No, Johansson came in last minute, basically.
Interesting.
And they reshot some stuff and added her into it.
So Liz was talking about how if it wasn't Johansson, it could have been a very different film for her.
Absolutely. It would have changed it entirely for me because that was just the one thing that just kind of got to me. I wanted it to be unrecognizable. And I wanted the visual to be totally blank when I thought of her initially.
Okay, well, think of it this way. If you're someone who doesn't know what Scarlett Johansson's voice sounds like, I mean, obviously it's hard to explain because you know what she sounds like, the face. I still think it's a very, a somber, smooth, welcoming voice. And I think maybe at the end of the day, that's what we could look at. But you're right. It is a little distracting knowing that it's Scarlett Johansson. So I see where you're coming from. I really do. For me, though, it just solidifies her as in a more human way, which helps you understand her as, a love interest rather than this computer that he's trying to fall in love with.
Scarlett Johansson's voice is very, it's kind of raspy. It's kind of relatable. She kind of giggles and squeaks
in a way.
a little bit. Yeah, you want to be attracted to Samantha's character.
Oh, totally.
Right? Right? He obviously
I am attracted to this character.
Yeah, you need to feel that attraction. And I think that Johansson really, she hit that one.
Well, she was considered to be nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this film, but the Academy denied her because it was a voice role.
Which that's unfortunate because that would have been so cool.
Totally,
it would have been cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
The person that was originally cast, her name was Samantha Morton.
Interesting.
She's a British actress. She's in a lot of different TV series actually. A couple movies here and there.
See, honestly, the British accent may have thrown me off because it's obviously not in England or anything like that, and I feel like that would have made her feel a little bit more like a computer for me.
100%. I think that they would have made her speak not in an accent. I think she would have had an American accent.
You think so?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, that's probably a good point because it would have taken me out of it a little too much. It would have felt more like
here's
the way Siri, yeah, exactly. The way Siri talks to you, it's I get it, but it's a little different. I don't know. Especially since they're trying to relate to you, right? But I guess you raise a good point. She probably would have been told to speak with a different accent.
But it's interesting that Johansson came in so late into the movie.
Yeah.
What happened in that time frame?
Spike Jonze started dating Scarlett Johansson.
I'm guessing what happened is during post they just realized that something was off about the voice acting, or their choice.
Poor Samantha, she's got the boot last minute. That's kind of sucks.
They kept her name in the movie though.
That's interesting.
That's nice.
That is nice. That kind of makes it, looking back at that now, it's kind of funny to see, imagine Joaquin Phoenix's character talking to someone that's not Scarlett.
I want to know, maybe Spike Jonze thought this was thinking kind of what I was thinking. And thinking, oh, maybe she's too recognizable. So use this person who's less familiar to us as an audience.
Well, but he ended up
But then he switched it. But initially, why did he have somebody?
Well, I don't know. I would argue that maybe he was thinking the way we're both thinking. I think maybe he was thinking in your mindset, thinking I don't want to have a recognizable voice.
Whoa.
But then he went on to say, hey, no, Kyle, you're right. Liz is wrong. Let's go with that. So,
dang it.
I don't know. That's a good point. I guess maybe that's something we'll probably never know, but it is interesting. That's because that is such a huge part of this film, right? I mean, that's kind of what I think most people go away thinking about this film is the voice. It's not maybe that she's a computer, but it's a guy falling in love with a voice.
A little side note here too, where I kind of related the film to our day today, when Samantha says that she's in love with more than just him.
Right.
Suddenly it kicked into catfish kind of for me a little bit.
Yeah. I was just going to bring
Like,
that up,
right?
actually.
Yeah, it felt very like there was a catfish marathon on recently, so maybe that's why. But yeah, it just like all of a sudden I was like, I felt this before. I've seen this feeling before.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, right. There are people who have relationships just online, right? Long distance relationships that just exist online.
Where they never actually see their pictures even sometimes.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I guess a lot of the time there is at least an avatar or
a voice.
profile photo of some kind. But you're right, there are situations that do exist where you're just talking to a voice. And that's interesting. I just think it's so cool how it's widely accepted. I think this form of technology isn't that far off. And I think it kind of leaves the viewer thinking like, damn, is that going to happen? Like, is what things are going to be like?
They really just amplified things that exist today, like the smartphones, touch screens, voice recognition, all that
VR,
kind of stuff.
right?
Yeah.
Like virtual reality. That kind of I think like Microsoft had a big like prototype room projection model they're trying to come out in a couple of years, and that was basically the video game he was playing.
You've always been able to call into like call services too. I mean, not for an extended period of time, but just like even for a short amount of time, you can always call someone. And
there's like chat lines and stuff like that. That's true, and I mean that's been around for years and years. So I mean, it's not really a new thing in a way, but I guess we're looking at it in modern technology.
Yeah,
or progressing too, right? I don't know. I think that really helps us enjoy this film in a way, whether you like the film or not. It lets you think, oh wow, is this actually what things are going to be like? Is this what we're progressing towards?
Yeah,
because it's so not.
They make it seem super natural in this movie.
It hits that like sweet spot of believable and not too far off. Right. You know.
Did you guys feel that Samantha actually loved Theodore, or was she just programmed to kind of, do the best that she needed?
That's a good question. I think that just because she was learning and gaining new experiences and trying to feel emotions and trying to feel and talking about it with him. And she did admit that in the beginning, she wasn't talking to anyone else really but him. Right. So I would think, in that way she did love him. But towards the end of the movie, I think she seemed more like a computer in the fact that, her use for him was done, or she was moving on to talking and learning from other people, and she was pursuing other love interests, like 600 of them.
Yeah, that's crazy. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Liz, because for me, I think she had more of like a puppy love stage. Like you were saying, she's bringing up new experiences, and when I was watching it again the other day, Olivia Wilde calls Theodore a puppy. He's like, if you're an animal, you be a puppy.
Right.
He's all about the puppy love. He's all about that, that falling hard and falling fast and having so many of these experiences at once. And I think that's what he's used to. And when he saw Samantha feeling those same feelings for him, he saw comfort in that, and he saw, normality in that. He's like, oh, I can relate. This is something.
But was she purposely resembling that?
I think so. I think she was, and I would say maybe she never really loved him nearly as much as he loved her. I would say.
And but Spike Jonze doesn't give us a definite as to whether or not this computer can feel emotion.
Well, that's the point. That's why we're talking about this film today. That's why this movie is kick ass.
I think that's maybe a good point to leave it off.
Yeah, I think final thoughts on her for Valentine's Day. Honestly, great date flick. Take first date. Take it to her.
Maybe not. Actually, it's a little bit of a depressing film.
It's a Kyle recommendation. Take her to her.
If you haven't seen it, definitely see it. Just watch it.
Yeah, just check it out, and also check out some more Spike Jonze films. Actually, Where the Wild Things Are is a good time. Yeah. Being John Malkovich is a weird but great time. I don't know. I think, So, it's been a great cast. Thanks for listening, guys.
As always, subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out on Instagram, all that sort of stuff.
Thank you guys again for having me.
Oh, yeah, no problem. By the way, Liz is on the cast this week, guys, so I hope you liked her. Yeah. It was a good time. Yeah, make sure to check us out on all the social medias, all that good stuff. Next week on the cast, we're going to be looking at Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. So I'll talk to you guys later.
Hasta mañana.